Hello, hope you're doing great. This is Mariappan Rajan, your friendly software engineer. And in this video, we're going to continue talking about how we can make use of arrays in C++. So in a previous video, we discussed about how when you create an array, you're essentially allocating a sequential block of memory in RAM. And we also saw the syntax that we can use to create an array in C++. And in this video, we're going to see how an array variable is under the hood basically just a pointer variable. So without further ado, let's get started. So we know that by means of creating an array using the syntax int fav_numbers, which is the name of the array variable, with the size of 3, which is denoted inside the square brackets, we can hold 3 integer values, in this case 10, 20 and 30. Perfect. And we know that the size required to hold this particular array is going to be 4 into 3, because 4 is the size of an int data type, and we multiply it with 3 because we are holding 3 integer data types, right? So 10, 20 and 30 each occupy 4 bytes in memory, right? So 4 into 3, we get 12 bytes. So basically this syntax allocates 12 bytes in memory for us, and using that we store these 3 values. So this is something that we already saw in our previous video. So let's say the first 12 bytes are available for us in RAM from here to here. So that means these 4 bytes are going to be used to store 10, and the next 4 bytes are going to be used to store the value 20, and finally the last 4 bytes are going to be used to store the value 30. Alright, this is cool, we get this, but what is the value that's actually being stored by this variable? What is the value we're actually storing inside of this fav_numbers variable? The value that we are actually storing by means of this fav_numbers variable is the memory address of the first value that you have in your array. That is what is stored by this fav_numbers variable. So in essence, this fav_numbers variable is actually a pointer variable. Alright, so it's just a pointer variable that points to the memory address of the first value in the array. And that is the reason when we want to access this first value, which is 10, we just need to mention 0 inside of this square brackets. So all we are asking the computer to do here is just go to the memory address that is present inside of this fav_numbers pointer, go here, so basically it goes here, and then just dereference it, just get me the value that is over there. So that means it just goes to this memory address, in this case which is 1, we're just like using 1, but actually the memory address will be denoted using hexadecimal values. For convenience, we're just putting these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 numbers, but anyway, you get the point, right? So when we say fav_numbers and put the index value of 0 inside of the square brackets, what we are asking the computer to do is basically go to the memory address pointed by this particular variable, so which is over here, and then just dereference it. Whatever value is present in that respect to memory address, just give it back to me. So that's essentially what we are asking to do. And when we say fav_number and we mention the index value of 1 inside of the square brackets, what we are asking the computer to do is go to the memory address pointed to by this fav_number variable. So it again goes to the same location. Basically, that's what's stored by the fav_numbers variable, right? So it just goes back to the same location, and then we are asking it to move 1 time the size of the data type. And in our case, since the data type is int, the size of integer data type is 4. So 1 into 4 is 4. So that means what is going to happen is we're going to move 4 bytes from the memory address that is stored by this fav_numbers variable. So that means from here we are moving 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? So by means of adding those 4 bytes, which we got by multiplying the int data type size 4 into 1, we are essentially over here, right? So this is basically the second value, the address of the second value that is present in the array. And now since we know the address of the second value, all we need to get the value is just dereference it. So if we just dereference this address, we get the values 20. So this is the main reason why for accessing the third value in an array, we specify the index value to be 2, and for accessing the second value, we specify the index value to be 1, and for accessing the first value, which is basically the value that is in that memory address which is held by fav_numbers array variable, we just need to mention 0. So basically under the hood, array variables are basically just pointer variables, and by means of using these index values which we put inside of these square brackets, we're just adding to the address that is present inside of the array pointer variable. So that's all we are doing. So as we can see, it's not magic, it's just clever engineering. Alright, so let's just pragmatically prove this, okay? So instead of using this array syntax, let's just make use of the syntax that you would use when working with pointers. So if this favorite numbers is actually a pointer variable, if we just print it, without these square brackets and indexes and so on, it should actually print out the memory address. It should actually print out the memory address that this particular, pointer variable is holding. So let's just see, if that's so. And yes, see, as expected, we are proving that by means of, seeing here that, this favorite numbers is holding a hexadecimal value. It's basically holding a memory address. It's not holding any, integer value. It's actually holding a memory address. Perfect. So this is good. So that means this is the memory address of the first value that is inside of this array. So in our case, this should be the memory address of the value 100 because that's the first value in our array, right? So let's just see if that is so. We can just dereference it, right? We can just say, put asterisk in front of the pointer variable, and that should basically dereference the pointer variable. That means dereferencing essentially is like, it just goes to that memory address and it returns back to us the value that is actually present inside of the memory address. So we have just put an asterisk in front of it to dereference it, and let's just, now compile and run this application. Perfect. Just as expected, we can see that by means of just dereferencing the array variable, we have not put any index value here, we have not put 0, or we have not put the square brackets. So we have done nothing of that sort, right? We are not using any, array syntaxes over here. We are just treating this favorite numbers variable as if it is a pointer variable, and we can see that by means of dereferencing the pointer variable, we are getting the value 100, right? So 100 is basically the first value inside of this array. This is awesome, right? This basically, proves that, the value that is stored by means of this favorite underscore numbers array variable is basically just the address of the first value of the array, right? So if that is the case, let's just take this a bit further. Is there a way we can actually get the second value, which is basically 200, by means of just using this pointer syntax? The way we can access the second value that is inside of our array is just by moving 4 bytes forward, because we know that an array allocates bytes sequentially, right? So that means, these 12 bytes, 4 into 3 is equal to 12, is allocated sequentially. So that means if in fact favorite numbers is holding the address of the first byte of the first value, if we just add 4 bytes to it, right? If we just add 4 bytes, we essentially are going to get the address of the second value that is there in memory. So that's essentially what we are going to do now. So all we need to do is we just need to say favorite numbers plus 1. Okay, so just like how we are, putting 1 inside of the square brackets, we just need to say 1. So here favorite numbers is in fact holding a hexadecimal value, right? It's actually holding the address, and here this particular pointer is of the type int, right? So we have mentioned it over here. Since this is, this particular pointer is of the type integer, when you add 1 to it, it will, basically multiply 1 with the size of the data type, which is 4 in this case, and it's going to add 4 bytes to the address that is present in this favorite underscore numbers pointer variable. So that means right now we are in fact, by means of using this syntax, having the address of the second value in this array. As a matter of fact, we can also print this out. So what I'll do is I'll just print favorite underscore numbers, without adding anything to it. So, or we can just say plus 0, which is basically adding nothing to it, right? So, or we can just say have the favorite numbers as it is. Okay, so this address is going to be different from this address. This is also going to return back to us an address. Okay, just to be more explicit, let's just put some brackets over here as well. So this is going to be an address, and this is going to be the address of the byte that is 4 bytes away from this address. So let's just see if that is so. So yes, we can actually see that in the first line we can see that there is an address that we are getting by means of just printing out favorite underscore numbers, and the second line basically over here this is a different address, right? It's a different address because we have added plus 1, which is basically we have just added plus 1 into 4, which is 4 bytes. We have added 4 bytes to it, and that's the reason we are getting this the other address over here. So basically this is the address of the second value that is inside of an array. So that means we can actually dereference this address, and that will return to us the second value, right? So this is just by means of using pointer syntax we are able to get the second value of the array. So let's just check it out. Yes, and as expected we can see that the second value that is getting printed, basically for this particular line, is actually the value 200, because we are in fact dereferencing the address, whatever address we are getting by means of adding 1 into 4, which is 4 bytes to the address that is present inside of the favorite underscore numbers pointer variable. we are essentially, like getting the value 200, which is the second value. The same we can do for the, the next third value as well. So by putting 2 here, and like we'll also put dereference this, original address as well. As a matter of fact, we can even say plus 0, just to keep up with the convention that we're using over in this line and this line. So this should essentially print 100, 200 and 300, just like how this particular syntax is printing us 100, 200 and 300. So if we just compile and run this application now, as expected, we are getting 100, 200 and 300, just like how we are getting 100, 200 and 300 by means of using this particular array syntax. We can do that by means of using pointer syntax as well. So this basically proves that an array variable is in essence just a pointer variable, and by means of using these index numbers, we're just adding to the address that is stored by means of this array variable. So that's basically what we are doing. I hope this video was useful and shed some light into how arrays are working inside of C++. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again in another video. Cheers!